Stephen Joyce.
Mr Chair, I thought I'd take the opportunity to take a short call before Mr Robertson does, because otherwise he wouldn't be saved from his rhetoric, and he needs to listen to this next bit, because his compatriots have sort of digging themselves a rather large hole, and he might actually thank me afterwards for not allowing him to dig the same hole for himself. So we'll see how he goes on this, but save him from some embarrassment. Firstly, Mr Chair, could I take this opportunity to thank the House, for most of the House anyway, for the support for this bill, because I think it's a very important bill. I'd like to talk about two aspects of it, if I could. One is the one that's had a bit of discussion this morning, in particular student services levies, and then the elements around export education. I think it's important, when listening to the flowery rhetoric of some of the opposition speakers around this, that they actually probably should go and talk to their members of their in quotes, economic team, because on the one hand they're trying to tell us that they're going to be fiscally responsible as a party if they ever get the chance to be in government again. And on the other hand, there's these guys over here which just want to spend more and more money without any reference to the facts. So let me acquaint you with a couple of the facts, actually, because despite, I think we all know here in Wellington, that every organisation that comes to Wellington comes for a reason, and they're always looking for a slightly better outcome than they have currently. And I have to say this: I don't think tertiary institutions are any different. So they always, I think they have for every tertiary education minister since time immemorial, cried poor as to how they are in life. But when you look at that, you actually have to check and say to yourself, well, how are they going? What's the reality of the situation? And the reality of the situation is quite interesting. So I look at three things that has happened to the public tertiary institutions in this country in the last couple of years. Firstly, they have the largest number of funded places that they have ever had. 20,000 more than when the previous government left office. That's 20,000 full-time funded places more than when the previous government, in a recession. Despite the global financial crisis, this government's commitment to tertiary education is such that we have funded 20,000 more full-time places than the previous government had in 2008. So that's point number one. The second point is that despite the global financial crisis and probably upsetting a number of other government-funded sectors of the economy, that the funding for tuition fees has continued to increase. Last year it was up 2.2%. This year for the degrees it's up 2% more. This is about the student services levies, and so it's gone up 2% this year for degree and higher education, and 2.2% last year. So it's continuing to increase, despite the fact that in most other parts of government-funded parts of the economy, it's been held flat because of the global financial crisis. So then, what's the outcome, Mr. Chair? The outcome is, interestingly, the institutions are the most profitable they have ever been. They are the most profitable institutions that we have ever had in this country, and they have the largest balance sheets that they have ever had. So you have the opposition, weirdly, on the one hand, siding with the institutions against the students and saying they're saying that the institutions should somehow get more money, and it's a bit sad that we've had to put this clamp on them for charging student services fees. But they're then saying they're not even bothering to look at the financial state of the institutions. They're just taking them out there. And this is a little bit the problem with the opposition. It's always about more funding. It's always about more funding, irrespective of the facts. It doesn't matter the facts. They just say the government should fund things more. Why? Because somebody asked for it. And that's what got us in the problem in the first place. So in the tertiary education sector, these student services levies are very, very important. Because I'm sorry, the institutions can't have it both ways. On the one hand, they walk in the door and say, we only ever use this for student services. And then they turn around and say to a select committee that they actually need it because somehow the government is diddling them on the tuition fees. By the way, they're the most profitable they've ever been. Now, I'm siding with the students on this. Unambiguously, this government is siding with the students. And we're saying you must justify, not just Mr. Robertson's little friends, but you must actually justify your student services fees. Effectively, we are saying, and those that are actually supporting this bill are saying, is that you must justify anything that you charge compulsorily to students. And that's what we're saying they must do, and that is what we are doing. And I think that's why this is a very good piece of legislation in that respect. I'd also like to, if I could, Mr Chair, take the opportunity to discuss briefly the issue, Mr Chair.
Honourable Stephen Joyce.
Discuss briefly the issues around export education, because this is very important as well. We have, I think, a very good education system in this country. It's one of those areas we feel passionately about, and so we're always challenging ourselves to do better, and I think that's very good, and there's always a healthy debate. But we actually have a pretty good education system, and a lot of the people in the world would love to have an education system like our one. And so we have an opportunity as a country to be able to help us afford more of the things that we want to afford by actually having a very strong and robust export education sector. In other words, by sharing our expertise around the world, by bringing students here, which is very good for our economy and our society generally, to bring some of the best and brightest from the rest of the world to New Zealand, countries that we want to do trade with like China and India and the Arab states, all those countries, to bring their students here, and also to sell our services to the world. So there are two things in this bill that are very, very important to help achieve that. Firstly, we've had a very fragmented organisational structure at the government end of export education. We've had effectively three organisations supporting export, in fact 3 or 4 supporting export education, which when you're a tiny country of just over 4 million people, that is overly complicating the situation. So we've had a look at that, and we've said rather than having NZTE do a chunk and the Education New Zealand Trust do a chunk and the Ministry of Education do a chunk, we'll actually put those limited resources that we have as a country together into one organisation, a new Crown agent called Education New Zealand. And I think that will be a fantastic platform to take export education forward from here. My colleagues in the Cabinet think so as well, and they are, as a result, supporting that with extra funding. $10 million a year over the next 4 years, $40 million, which is a massive increase on what's being spent previously. And it's because we see a great opportunity for this country and for the education sector in this country to actually grow our revenues from export education. At the same time, we must be careful that we don't have the Wild West developing again. Many of us remember, and some on the other side have the scars of what happened in the early 2000s when there just was insufficient quality control on the export education sector, and as a result one of our major client countries took a pretty dim view of our system for a while. So what we've done about that is we've taken an approach in government which is to be very strong on some of the providers that are perhaps not as good as they should be. And we've encouraged NZQA to take a pretty robust approach in the interest of protection of New Zealand's reputation overall and those providers that do a good job. And we've been encouraged by the industry to do so. Now, there has unfortunately been some limitations in the law, some quite significant limitations. The law was written many years ago, and there's a number of clauses in here that will help NZQA do their job. And it's a very important job, as I say, on behalf of the country. So while we're out there at the front end encouraging export education to grow, we must also have a good quality assurance regulator whose job it is to make sure that the reputation of New Zealand, that the actual education of the students and the training of the students is well protected. And I think that's a very important part of this bill that we shouldn't forget this morning. So I think it is a very good bill, Mr Chair. I appreciate the work from the Select Committee. We'll talk more about that in the third reading, but I look forward to it progressing through the House.
Carol Beaumont.
Thank you very much.